and welcome to another episode of Faith and Spirituality in a Time of Crisis. My name is Chris Fuller, and I'm the Chief Sponsorship and Mission Integration Officer at St. Joseph's College in Maine. During this time of pandemic, we've heard much in the news about the number of total cases and the number of deaths. We've also heard some news about how the pandemic has adversely affected communities of color and the marginalized and the poor. What we've not heard a lot about are how the pandemic has impacted tribal communities in the United States and how they are addressing this time. And so this is the first of two episodes where I have conversations with representatives from tribal communities, one in Maine and one in Montana. My guest today is Maulian Dana. Maulian serves as the appointed ambassador for the Penobscot Nation in Maine. Prior to this, she has served as an elected member of the Tribal Council. She brings to her role a 20-year career in activism around changing stereotypical Native American sports teams' mascots and replacing Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. So please join me for this conversation in Faith and Spirituality in a Time of Crisis. So I introduced you as the ambassador for the tribal ambassador for the Penobscot Nation. So can you describe a little bit for us what that means? What is your role as ambassador?
Sure. So taking it back to 2015, the Penobscot Nation and Passamaquoddy tribe actually removed their legislative representatives. And it was kind of a decision that came about because of how much the relationship between the tribes and the state had soured over the years, real misunderstandings about tribal sovereignty and how we interact with each other as sovereigns. And it kind of snowballed to the point where it just didn't seem equitable having a representative there anymore. So after that, the tribe saw a need to have sort of a representative and a diplomat and just somebody doing some governmental outreach and advocacy and representation. So they created this ambassador role to kind of fill that need in the state house, not sitting in the chamber anymore, but certainly being a presence there. And then kind of in a broader sense, being the face of the tribe to state, local, and federal governments, and really pushing advocacy and education and communication and stuff like that. So I am actually the first person to ever be appointed ambassador. I had been elected to the tribal council, and I had kind of found my place in politics, I guess. So that was where I was leaning anyway. And it just seemed to be a really natural fit. So I've been in this role since 2017 now, and being the first person to do it is certainly a huge honor. And I feel so blessed to be in this role, but it's also a really big responsibility because I'm shaping what it looks like, right?
Certainly. And you've worked on several legislative initiatives, right, in this role. So what have been some of the legislative work that you've done?
Yeah, we were able to pass a ban on Indian mascots in Maine public schools and universities. And that was definitely something close to my heart. I have been working on activism around that for 20 years, like you had said. And we also passed a bill to change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day in Maine. And those were kind of the ones that got a lot of attention. They started some really important conversations about race, I think. And then we also passed some other bills. We got a Wabanaki seat on the Maine Criminal Justice Academy board. We expanded the Violence Against Women Act to Maine tribes. And right now, we're working on a very large effort to amend the Settlement Act between the tribes and the state of Maine.
Oh, nice. So, the terms that are most often used are Native American or tribal communities or American Indian, which can be helpful to be as a reminder that there are indigenous peoples in this country. But it also can risk kind of homogenizing these communities as if there's one way to be a Native American or one way to be in a tribal community, when in fact there's a great deal of diversity. So what would you describe as some of the kind of unique characteristics of the Penobscot Nation?
Sure. So the Maine tribes are going to be very different from tribes we see out west or even into California. Every single region has certain similarities. And the eastern tribes, the Wabanaki Confederacy of Maine and the Iroquois, and all of kind of us over here, we're going to have similar traditions. Our drums will look alike, our clothing will look alike. And I think a lot of our culture is shaped by the environment. So you'll see different tribes across the country live in harmony with their environment, or we aspire to anyway. And the Penobscot Nation, we're a river people. We actually, our reservation land, we're very lucky that we are in our ancestral homeland. So a lot of tribes are displaced and moved from their homeland to reservation, but we actually still reside where our ancestors did. That is on islands in the Penobscot River. So we're going to be a little bit different, just because of our geography. We're centrally located in Maine. So the other Maine tribes are very, very far north with the Micmac and the Maliseet, or they're very, very far east. Like the Passamaquoddy have two communities. So Penobscot Nation, we're located near Bangor and Old Town. So we're a little more central and a little more urban, I guess. We're near these hubs. So we're going to have slightly different economic needs and things like that.
So we've heard a lot in the news, obviously, about the overall impact of the coronavirus. And we've heard some stories about its impact on some communities, such as African-American communities, Latino communities. We've not heard a lot in the news about its impact on tribal communities. We're just starting to hear some stories about, say, out of South Dakota, for example, where there's the kind of tension between the state government and the tribal communities there, but we've not heard a lot about its impact. So what's been the impact of the coronavirus on your community?
So we're kind of lucky, Penobscot Nation. We've had one confirmed case that's a person kind of not in the community, but with ties to the community. So we have no cases, knock on wood, on the reservation here. I think that we were very proactive in our approach. You talked about the tribe in South Dakota, how they set up the roadblocks and the governor is fighting them on it. We've taken a similar approach. We've posted signs. Our reservation is an island. So we posted signs at the end of the bridge saying basically no entrance to the community without prior approval if you're not a community member. We've worked very closely with all of our tribal departments, the health department, the public safety, and we've really been, we've taken this very seriously. We have a very large elder population. We do have vulnerable people that this could be disastrous for if we did have an outbreak. So we've been effective, I think, at containing it. And looking at the tribes out west that are suffering from this, I really feel for them, because Indigenous nations, we do hold our elders in such high esteem, and anything like this that is such a threat to them, it's very scary and frustrating. But we're managing it well, I think.
Good. And are there any traditions that you're able to draw upon also that help you kind of make sense out of what's happening? Not just in terms of dealing with it practically, but just kind of making sense out of the experience of this, which includes, I'm sure for you, the experience of sheltering in place, for example, and what kinds of traditions within your own tribal community can you draw upon to be helpful in that regard?
Yeah, we're absolutely holding our culture very close, I think, to get through this. I have two children, they're 11 and 13, and our school is located on the reservation. And before they release the kids home to this quarantine shelter in place situation, they released them in mid-March when we didn't know how long they'd be home, and now they won't be going back this year. But the school actually held a ceremony and smudged all the students and all the teachers with sage and medicines, and kind of, just reminded all the children that they're very loved and very sacred. And I think that we're seeing that theme throughout a lot of our community. We're not getting together in person, but we're really being there for each other. We're trying to plan things for the future. We've had a few deaths on the island, not COVID related. And it's been tricky managing those, because usually funerals and kind of these rites of passage are a really big deal in our community. We have a sacred fire that burns for 3 days where the family can come and pray and talk and heal. So those things are looking a lot different, but I really think we're coming together in a new way to make sure that these spirits are on their way safely, and they're still drumming and singing, and there's sacred fires, but there's social distance. It's really nice to feel the love and connection, even though it's a time of sadness.
That's good. That's good to hear. And you mentioned both the steps you've taken, very similar to the tribe in South Dakota, but the tensions there. And you've also even actually mentioned kind of prior tensions between tribal communities here in the state of Maine. Has the state been helpful to you in regard to the own actions you've been undertaking to kind of deal with this crisis?
Yes, they have. I really think that a lot of our legislative momentum that we've had over the past couple of years has opened a lot of those channels of communication. We have a liaison for the tribes in the governor's office, Donna Loring, who is a Penobscot Nation citizen. So having her working in the governor's cabinet, she's facilitating weekly calls with tribal leaders, and we're in close contact with the Maine CDC. We're sharing information, raising concerns, and I've seen a good collaborative relationship through this, actually.
That's good to hear. So, my real last question for us has to do with perhaps in terms of your observations from your perspective, in terms of seeing how this crisis is affecting the country. What is it that we might learn from tribal communities and how we are addressing this? Is there something we might take from your experience that we could learn from?
Yeah, I think that in tribal communities, you're going to see a lot of harmony with nature. And I think that this pandemic is showing a lot of people that the earth was really crying for change. And whether, no matter where this virus came from, there's no question that it's really changed how we do things, and it's changed our impact on the earth. We're seeing cleaner air, cleaner water, animals being healthier. So I've seen a lot of tribal people sharing different stories and really rejoicing in the healing that's going on with Mother Earth. So that's kind of one observation that I've made. And I feel like Indigenous communities were kind of, it's hard to articulate, but we're okay with sitting still. I think, there's not this real rush to be productive and always be doing something. And me personally, I have a little bit of that. So a teaching that I take from my culture is knowing when to sit still and to listen and to, look into how you can be intuitive to the world around you. So that's something that I've looked to my culture for. And I think that maybe, the larger society might take advantage of that as well, learning about that.
I think that's very helpful to me in terms of, those of us who are working from home. I think in some way are feeling an extra pressure to do more work, to get more done, rather than maybe perhaps taking some moments for stillness. Or if we're not working, we're trying to fill those moments with some kind of entertainment because we're bored, right? We're bored at home, and rather than perhaps cultivating a practice of stillness is, I think, a very helpful words of advice. So thank you.
Absolutely.
So thank you, Maulian. I very much appreciate your time to share with us your insights and the beauty of your culture. I wish you all the best of luck, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Take care.